Here we go. 1 2 1 2. My name's Johnny. I'm here with the legend, Dr. J. Bernstein. It's good to see
Yep.
you. All right, let me do that again. That didn't sound right. All right, 1 2 1 2. I'm Johnny. I'm here with the legend, Dr. Bernstein. It's
Mhm.
great to join you today. How you doing, Doctor?
I'm doing great. Couldn't be better. Thank you. How about you?
Oh, hey, I'm doing great. We were talking about some of these recent Senate testimony coming from Kennedy, talking about all the wildness. Now yesterday, Trump saying all the vaccines are poison, every single one of them. That was surprising. What you think about that?
I'll tell you what. You know what? Yeah, it's true. Number one, and the reason why things are sort of being slow rolled is because really the population has to get the information gradually. Too much information at once is going to just either make it not believable, or it's going to cause some people to like really act out, in society. Ultimately, let's just say hypothetically speaking, um, if what's happening now or it's going to or in the near future just suddenly changed overnight, I mean, you run the risk of really maybe um, potentially a civil war. Because just people just as a population, there's population dynamics. In fact, that's what the CIA knows how to do. They now know how to change regime. They know how to do regime change in a population. The military intelligence and psychological operations in the military. This is what they do. They know how to change the heart and minds of populations, and there's a certain science to it. And what we're seeing right now is a complete overhaul of the narrative, but it has to happen gradually. So we've up until now, in fact, what we've seen through COVID, we we have now the population's has been woken up to the idea, the fact that maybe what happened with the COVID vaccine was nefarious. Maybe there's something wrong with it. And so now, then after that, we have to see that really the entire system has been so corrupted from the very beginning. And I actually personally have gone to a deep dive into all the vaccines, the literature on the vaccines over the past few months, and I've now become somewhat of an expert in vaccines. Where I wasn't before. I was like every other doctor, who wasn't an expert, and doctors are not experts in vaccines. And I believed in the whole narrative as well. I mean, the basic concept that, you can create this herd immunity through vaccines. Yeah, it makes sense. It does make sense. And the truth is vaccines in that sense does work. But the problem is in what President Trump is sort of referring to is all the excipients in the vaccines. The excipients are the things in the vaccines, the additives in the vaccines that are all poisonous. So we're not dealing, like, I'm not against, for example, like, pick a vaccine. I'm not against actually the way it works. In fact, the chickenpox vaccine, even though I don't think it's a good idea because I think natural immunity worked much better, but let's just say has been shown to actually decrease chickenpox in even recent studies, actually, while they were looking at the safety of all the vaccines, they happened to come out in the literature in some of the studies showing, yeah, actually, it will decrease the incidence of chickenpox, but the aluminum, the mercury, the polysorbate 80, the formaldehyde, all these things that are in the vaccines are human toxins, and the damage that's done to the population by the excipients far outweighs any benefit of the vaccine itself. And the other thing is, like, for example, polio. Polio is a really great topic because, in the 1950s, the whole population was scared into the fact that polio was going to, was going to cause this huge amount of harm to the population. Happened to be in 1952, one or two, right around there. There was a U.S. census, and the census was that there was about 150 million people in the country at the time. 1954, when the vaccine was rolled out, there was basically at that time, which was the peak of polio cases in the history of America, there was approximately 3,140 people who died from polio. So if you do run the math on it, which I did, that's 2 in 100,000 died from polio. And the other thing is that there's something in the order of about 50,000 people had symptoms. In fact, the majority of people, greater than 50% of people get polio, are completely asymptomatic. And an additional 30% maybe will get some mild viral illness. About 20% may get, or actually less than that, less than 20% will get some small percentage. Will get some form of paralysis, um, and the paralysis can range from mild to severe. And so that's basically, if you could compare that to the numbers in autism and severe autism, it's staggering how that the hold on, in fact, I can pull up exact numbers if you want. I'll tell you what, let's go to a different topic. I'll pull that up while we're talking. But ultimately, the severity of illnesses, the severity of the morbidity from autism, which is a lot in by and large caused by the vaccines. I'm not going to say exclusively, but going back to the excipients here, the aluminum is a neurotoxin, and the mercury is also a neurotoxin. And you're injecting these neurotoxins when you get the vaccines into people, and that causes damage, it causes harm, causes neurologic deficits. And autism and ADD not only are theoretically neurologic problems caused by the vaccine, but it actually has been shown in many studies actually.
Yeah, we're talking about the aluminum. It's one of the most potent neurotoxins on the planet, right? And because it's so toxic, it produces such an inflammatory effect. This is why it's used as an adjuvant to make the immune system really remember those antigens, so that you get that kick. And meanwhile, the one size fits all. If you or I were to go get a shot, it's going to have the same dose as what they're giving these babies, or close to it. And giving it to a 1-day-old, it's just crazy. The hepatitis B, this is the big one. I think 3 shots within the first year, starting on the first day.
Right. Yeah.
And as I understand it, like, the baby doesn't really have an immune system until 6 months. It doesn't really come online. It's kind of just using its mother's antibodies through breast milk. Right. So that you can't even. It's like, what are you guys even doing? It doesn't make any sense, does it?
No. In fact, the amount of aluminum that's in the hepatitis B vaccine in a 1-day-old, if you look at the amount of micrograms per kilogram of body weight, it's 10 times that of what you give an adult. So you're giving, again, just based on the amount per body weight, it's I believe in the baby it's about 70 micrograms per kilogram, and the adult you give 7 micrograms per kilogram of body weight of aluminum. And aluminum, now mercury is a little different in that it'll go right into the brain because it's lipid soluble. Aluminum's not. So it doesn't get into the brain in adults so easily because you have something called the blood-brain barrier, which is a lipid layer. In a baby, a newborn baby, the blood-brain barrier is not sealed. It's porous, especially in a premature baby. It's even more porous, right? So the aluminum will get into the baby's brain much more easily than in an adult brain, and you have 10 times the amount you're giving in the vaccine per body weight. Not only that, you have a developing brain. I mean, there's such biologic plausibility. It's just it's screaming in your face that, like, this is not right. This is not good to give a 1-day-old. And anybody out there, I'm hoping people are listening are not already on board. I mean, hopefully everybody's on board. But if there's anybody out there who this is new material to, go ahead and ask your pediatrician, why are we giving a hepatitis B vaccine to a 1-day-old baby? And there's no logical reason. Hepatitis B is transmitted by sexual contact, blood transfusion, IV drug abuse, right? So a 1-day-old doesn't have these issues. In fact, Dr. Peter McCullough quoted the fact that in order to the likelihood of a baby being exposed to hepatitis B is something like 1 in 7 million. So you have to give 7 million shots theoretically to actually protect one child, right? But even still, just like you said, they don't have a competent immune system. So you're not even that 1 in 7 million it's not doing anything for them. And so the only logical, in fact, I've asked pediatricians about this. The only rational reason that they give is to get the parents used to vaccines. That's the only reason. So,
That's just crazy. So, we know that everything has a side effect, right? Tylenol, aspirin, it all has a side effect. And we're going to inject these tiny poison cocktails into babies. And then you talk about the long-term safety testing, right? So when they give these shots to the babies, when they test them against a true placebo safety or a true placebo, they test these for years on end, right? They have these long-term safety trials that they have to refer to make sure these drugs are okay. Is that right?
we think that they do, but it's not so obvious. It's not so, so the
Well,
drug.
yeah, I'll say this. What Dr. Jazz, it's four. There's two hepatitis B vaccines, as I understand, and one has a 4-day study, and one has a 5-day study. So yeah,
Right.
that's
Right.
what's really happening, right?
Yeah. There's no long term studies. It's funny. There's one study that's quoted a lot, um, and it's regarding the Gardasil vaccine, which is the vaccine against venereal warts, and usually it's given to teenage girls, teenage boys also, because you can get venereal warts in the glands of the male, but it's more sort of pushed on the girls to prevent cervical cancer, right? Because venereal warts increase certain types of subtypes will increase the risk of cervical cancer, and of course the vaccine the pediatrician practices are getting reimbursed for percentages of vaccinated people. So this Gardasil vaccine for cervical cancer is really being pushed on nearly everybody. So there is a safety study with the Gardasil vaccine. It's fascinating. It's not published in the scientific literature, but it's found in the package insert, and I found it, and because it's quoted, I've seen it quoted, and so interestingly, when you have a package insert in any drug, they always list the studies that support its benefit, right, or harm, whatever the case is, right? Any studies published on it. So, but this package insert gives the study, but there are no references at all because there are no studies other than the one that's actually performed by the drug company itself, and the drug company didn't report it, didn't publish it. They just did their own study, and they put the results on the package insert. And this is the only study that's sort of touted as being safe, right? So, so if you look on page 7 of the package insert, and what you want to look for serious adverse reactions, okay? Because those are the ones that are either life-threatening or cause death, and usually means that they need to be hospitalized, right? So that's where you want it. When you go to a package insert, I'm going to see what go to the serious adverse reactions. Okay, you go to page 7 in the Gardasil package insert. And I actually had it right in front of me. I'll read what it says. It says, across clinical studies, 258 individuals out of 29,323 individuals, age 9 to 45 girls and women, and 9 through 26 years of boys reported a serious systemic adverse reaction. And then they say that, so out of the 258 individuals, 128 were the Gardasil and 130 were the placebo. And then they do the math, and they find basically that the percentage of serious adverse reactions for the Gardasil, the intervention is 0.8%. The placebo is 1%. So it actually looks like the placebo might be a little bit higher in terms of adverse reaction, the serious adverse reaction. Well, rounding off 0.8 and 1% is about 1%, right? So you're talking 1% serious adverse reaction. That's pretty high, actually. I mean, think about it. 1 out of 100, basically, get a serious reaction, right? So, okay, now. Then you look. That's what the package insert says. But then you look. You can see in the package insert the placebo. Its placebo says AAHS control. Actually, the placebo is really two things. It's AAHS control, which is 13,023 patients, and the Gardasil was 15,706. That arm. Then there's another thing that says saline placebo, which is 594. So there's really two controls, the placebos. There's the there's the AAHS and the saline. And the AHS is over 13,000. The placebo is 594. Okay, so then you said, well, what's AAHS? You do look above it and you see it says amorphous aluminum hydroxyphosphate sulfate. Basically, the excipient, the aluminum, is the placebo arm. So when they're looking at intervention versus placebo, there's aluminum in both sides. And that's why you have 1% serious adverse reaction. But if you don't really look at it and you don't understand what it's saying and you don't really analyze it, you're going to just hear, like, maybe you say the real savvy pediatrician may take a look at and say, most of the pediatricians are not even going to be able to tell you this, honestly. Go to the pediatrician and ask. But the real smart ones will be like, oh yeah, they looked at it. There's no difference between intervention and placebo. But then you got to go a little further, and you got to see the placebo is the aluminum arm. So it's the aluminum with the vaccine against the aluminum. But there's another little notation here. There's a saline placebo, 594. Well, they don't even mention what the how many adverse reactions in that placebo. They don't mention it. But I found it from another source. There are 0 from that 594. It happens to be the 594. It's the saline placebo. I wish it was a bigger number, because a zero adverse reaction would mean something more. But even 594 should get roughly 6 adverse reactions, 5 to 6. If this is, but there was 0. So it is a statistically significant number that the saline gives 0 adverse reactions. So I hope that makes sense. I got a little complicated, but hopefully I broke it down, where this is literally the only study that's being touted as showing this, this outcome that is basically reported to be in many different sources to show safety.
Yeah, I just wanted to pull this up. This is a number of different infectious diseases, going left to right from, back when they were prevalent to as, sanitation improved, as nutrition improved, these diseases went down to near 0. Then these vaccines were introduced. Now, these vaccines, they used to say, a vaccine took 10, 20, 30 years to produce. Now they want to turn them out in 24 hours, give you a personal one, turn you into a guinea pig for your own medication. But this was our history. And so, nowadays, people say, oh, the polio vaccine, it saved us. And it's like, well, go read The Moth and the Iron Lung, read all about that. Read about how DDT was really the cause of this. When polio broke out, when polio started, 1894 up in the Northeast, it was affecting animals. And then, of course, the polio virus doesn't affect animals. So what was going on? Well, this was rural America. This is where the DDT was just being used way too much. Of course, this is banned now. And so, the same way we had a lot of counting errors with the PCR testing, where they, you could tell, like, oh, hey, look, somebody died of a car accident, but we're going to say they died of COVID. The same way that once you got vaccinated, they wouldn't give you a COVID test. They would just say, oh, you don't have COVID. People who got the vaccine by definition don't get the COVID. Then later we realized that wasn't true. They said that we had a pandemic of the unvaccinated. So in 2021, a lot of people were dying. More people were dying in 2021 than 2020. What was happening? We did have a pandemic of the unvaccinated, but they counted people who had just received the shot or just received the second shot and hadn't gone 2 weeks yet. They counted those people as unvaccinated, and those were the people that were dying. We're seeing this bear out, and they've suppressed these studies all over the world. But we're seeing them come out finally. Japan just a couple weeks ago, I don't know if you saw this, but releasing this data that we're seeing the excess deaths data, all of it in the vaccinated, and we see the peak. We see how it peaked. We see how 100 days out from the vaccination is where these deaths were peaking. And we see them coming down from there. And so if you're a year out, what that data showed, and that was encouraging, if you're a year out from your last COVID shot, it looks like you're out of the woods. So that was good to see here. I want to pull that up as well.
Good. Yeah, I'm glad you're showing this data regarding the sanitation, because that's a really big point. everybody's blame. Everybody's think it seems to be the common narrative is that the modern medicine has really made people more healthy, and it's much more to do with sanitation. 100%.
So have you seen this, Jay? So look at this. So this is the mortality rate is on the as you go higher here, and we have these blue dots. These are the vaccinated. This is the deaths. So 0.01 was the normal baseline mortality rate, and we see for the unvaccinated it stayed at that line, 0.01. So that's how many people were dying usually. We see that it went up to almost 5 times that for the vaccinated, and we see a peak. We see a peak 100 days out. So this, we talk about gold standard science. What's gold standard science? They cherry pick the data, so they can take a $20 million randomized controlled trial and they can fabricate and with their bias they can get the outcome they want. This data, I think this is some of the best data it's agreed upon. Excess death data, there's no way to really cheat on it, right? So this shows very clearly what's happening here in Japan. I wish we had data like this here for us, but like I said, you're counted as unvaccinated here when you've got your first shot. And if the first shot gets you or the second shot gets you within 2 weeks, you're counted as unvaccinated. So
that's great. And you said this is from the Japanese study?
Yes, this just came out. This is a Japanese study. So we see this is 25 million vaccinated people. So I think this was about 10 million people. So that's a big control group. This is about 1/10 of the population there. These came from FOIA requests that were refused and refused and refused. Finally came out. This is kind of alarming. Though you look at the number of deaths, about this works out to about 1% of everybody who was vaccinated or every vaccine. 1% of every vaccine, you see a death happen for each one. Now, the pushback from the other side, to be fair, let me present that. They say, well, the people who were vaccinated were more likely to be in a nursing home. The people who were vaccinated were more likely to, need this shot for protection. But what I would counter with is that in Japan, much like here, about 80% of the population received the COVID vaccine. So lots and lots and lots and lots of young people were receiving the vaccine as well. So
right. So I mean, it's the all cause mortality is really what we're looking at. So when you look at all cause mortality, if you're looking at the entire population, and so vaccinated versus unvaccinated. I mean, you're not selecting out certain age groups. It's like there's certain percentage of elderly or in the nursing homes 2 years ago. It's not really changing in both groups. You know what I mean? Both groups are so it's I don't think that's really what we call a confounder. Yeah. So let me just quickly I said I would look up this thing with polio and autism and stuff. So just to go with the numbers here, I found it. In 1952, there were 58,000 symptomatic cases of polio. A little over 3,000 died, but symptomatic 58,000. 37,000 were mild viral illness. 21,000 had mild to disabling paralysis. Okay, but think about the whole thing. 3,000 died. 58,000 symptomatic cases. And of that, just really the ones that are significant, 21,000. 21,000 had paralysis. In autism, 2022, 1.1 million children with autism spectrum disorder, 1.1 million. 275,000 had profound autism, which means lifelong 24/7 care. 24/7, that's very debilitating versus say, one being in a wheelchair, for example. Much more debilitating to have profound autism. And there were 275,000 in 2022. And for those that think, well, how do you know it's the vaccines? Well, something's doing it. It's on the rise. It's 1 in 30. The last a few years ago, just 1 in 31. I think it's even higher now. Something's doing it, and there's absolute 100% biologic plausibility that the vaccines are causing it. Is it the only cause? I can't say that for sure, but I think it's probably the biggest contributor. That's what I think.
Wow.
You know,
All right, so we were talking a little bit about where goes one, where goes all. I don't know too
yeah,
much about this, but you were talking a little bit about how got to roll out these things slowly. So you want to expound on that a little bit?
yeah. This is a great topic. This is connected to really the vaccines. The question is, how did we get here? How did the government all of a sudden become so corrupt like this? Well, when I was in, I think even middle, I think junior high school, I remember having conversations about uh, JFK when he was killed. Was it Lee Harvey Oswald or not? And I remember we were back then. It was like, oh, you're a conspiracy theorist if you think wasn't Lee Harvey Oswald, right? Well, now in fact, RFK Jr. said it on the campaign trail when he was running for president against Trump at the very beginning. He did say on the I heard him on the campaign trail that the CIA killed my uncle. He said it. And the other thing is that most people are now starting to believe, it's certainly plausible, that the CIA was the cause. And I can tell you that based on my knowledge and from my um, um, analysis of the publicly available information, I believe that it was an inside job. Lyndon Johnson was involved. There were many other entities involved, and certainly George Bush was involved in that, and that's why he got rewarded by becoming president eventually. Um, so um, so if you can at least accept that, okay, that's the first step. I mean, there may be people watching who don't accept that, and right now there's not much I can do for you. But let's just say that's the premise that the CIA was responsible for killing our JFK. Okay, once you accept that, then everything else is easy to understand. Because what happened was JFK. In fact, there's audios that he was talking about taking down the deep state. That you can find. I mean, most places you can find that. That's not conspiracy. He was talking about the deep state. He used the word deep state, and he said it was. He gave the last speech he gave was about I think about 10 days roughly before he was assassinated. Um, and he was giving a speech, about a 50-minute speech to a bunch of reporters, and it was all media, telling him he was describing the seriousness of the deep state and how it's stronger than any standing army in the world. And they've infiltrated in many modern governments around the world. So he was talking about how serious it was. And then after that, within, say, a couple of weeks, he's now been assassinated. And that he was working with generals. And those generals, those original generals, I believe there were 71 of them, they regrouped. This happened, I believe, in November of '63. And then they regrouped on Christmas Eve, December 24th. They had a meeting. And they met and they decided to start a long-term strategy to take down the deep state, because they saw, I mean, ultimately, there's a lot of things that have been happening even back then that they were undermining the Constitution. And when you talk about the military has to follow the law. They go by law and orders. They have the UCMJ, and they are a law-abiding. The military is the military. There's no compromise with the military. So if the law of the land, which is the Constitution, nothing supersedes the Constitution. That's the law of the land, and it's based on God's law, and so nothing trumps that. So when things were being done to undermine the Constitution, which they were, then it has to be that the military has to act. So the elements within the military that were honest and that were doing what they were supposed to do started a plan. And they started a plan of infiltrating special forces after they do what they do and whatever, and then they certain people were picked to go into certain places that they would help. Put them in various places in government and in science, in medicine, in Hollywood, in business, finance, and they infiltrated into all aspects, and they rose to the top of most of their fields, and they were all networking. I remember when I was in the military, I was in the military for 21 years. I did have an opportunity to go into the Green Berets once, and I almost did it. I didn't do it. In the end, I had a good friend who wanted to do it with me. He wound up going in. He was a dentist. And what was being told to me is that, look, if you go into special forces, your whole career is set. You can do whatever you want. You'll be, the network is amazing. And I didn't quite believe it. now I know why they were saying that. Is because that's really what they were doing, is they were putting people in various places of positions and of power and influence, and not only that, to get information. And it was kind of like basically this one large RICO case, where that's what, when the FBI or they start taking down these drug networks. They have to infiltrate themselves into the networks, and sometimes they're doing bad things. That's the way it goes, and they have to take them down all at once. You can't start arresting people along the way, because then the bad guys are going to go into hiding. So that's what they did. They infiltrated themselves, and they watched what was happening, and it was a decades-long plan. And what happened in 2016 when Trump got elected? And I mean, think about this: when Hillary Clinton didn't have an acceptance speech, she never thought she was going to lose. You know why? Because they were cheating in the election. They had no clue they had no idea that she was going to lose that election. It was a complete, not just a surprise. It was, a foregone conclusion she was going to win. The reason why she won is because the military went in, the cyber guys went in and stopped some of the cheating. They didn't do anything illegal. What they did is stop some of the illegal things happening, and they got Trump in. And once Trump was in, that's when that's all they needed, because then what happened during the Trump administration, okay, what he did is he created more departments of defense. Before that, there were only 3 DODs. There was Army, Navy, and Air Force, and the Marines were under the Navy. In 2017, I believe it was, he created more departments of defense. He created the Space Force. He created the Special Operations Command. I believe the Marines, its own DOD. I'm not sure about that. They could still be under the Navy, but I think they're their own DOD. If they're their own DOD, there's 6 DODs, Department of Defense. If they're under the Navy still, there's 5. I have to look it up. I'm not really sure. I heard 2 conflicting things. In any case, the question is this: what is the Space Force? What did Trump do when he created the Space Force? Well, the space is not just rockets in space, okay? Space is this space around here that we are in right now. You and I are communicating through this space. It's called cyberspace. He created a cyber warfare, Department of Cyber Warfare. That's what he created. And when he did that, he put the NSA, which has a black budget, just like the CIA does, but the NSA has a black budget 10 times the size of the CIA. He put the NSA under the Space Force. So once the Space Force controlled the NSA, the amount of power that they have now was unbelievable. It's almost like at that point in time, they've won the war, because they've won this, because that's what they needed, and that's what they got. And that happened during the Trump administration, and then they started the war that's happening right now. There's a war that's been going on, and when Trump said 2 things. That first of all, he did everything he was going to say. Everything he said he was going to do, he did. Right? Everything. He hasn't gone back in anything. Right? So what are the 2 things that you think he may have not done? Number one is that drain the swamp. At the end of his presidency, he didn't drain the swamp, but he is draining the swamp. He's draining it. It started during his presidency, and they allowed Biden to cheat in 2020 because it's like a RICO case. You got to let the bank robber rob the bank before you catch him. You can't take him out before you rob the bank. And then the other things, they need to figure out who the bad guys are. Where are they? And we're seeing they're coming out of the woodwork right now from what Doge did, and not only that, what's going on with all the departments within the administration now. We're hearing about the CDC, all these things happening right now. All the rats right now are coming out, and they are catching the rats and figuring out who the bad guys are, and that's what he's doing. This is how he's draining the swamp. The swamp is so big and so deep, and nobody ever thought, especially Chuck Schumer, some of the comments he's made. Regarding the Supreme Court and all these things, all these ridiculous statements he's made. He thought that's what everybody thought. There's no way to get out of this deep state. They will. I forget the term he used, but something till Tuesday, whatever he said. That's what they thought. And the SES, by the way, I have a friend who just actually left the IRS because he was one of those people that was released. Yeah, we should talk about the IRS, by the way. That's a great topic. But um, he knows about the SES. He knows that he knows it's an appointed position, and he knows they make millions, right? But he's in the GS categories. I think he made it to GS 13, which is pretty high actually, out of 15 in the government pay scales. But the SES is above them, and they are appointed positions because that is the deep state within our government, and he's taking it all down. I don't know if that makes any sense, but if you want to talk about the IRS next, I can. But any comments on that so far?
I tell you, yeah, you talk about what comes to mind. You talk about what comes to mind when you talk about what didn't get done. Lock her up, lock her up. But then, yeah, you nailed it. Yeah, we didn't get the swamp drained, and yeah, it makes sense that maybe you have to do it all at once. But
Well, going back to
here, I got
lock her up, in this August. I mean, no, sorry, this October. The congressional hearings are set. They have dates of congressional hearings. Hillary Clinton, I believe her date is October 16th. They are all going to go in front of Congress this fall, okay, very soon, within the next couple of months, and it's all going to get exposed. That the accountability for Clintons is coming very soon. And then when it gets exposed, and then there's going to be, I don't know exactly how they're going to work it, but there's going to be, let's put it this way, there's going to be accountability. I have some ideas of how it's going to happen, but I don't want to say because in wartime, when the military is running this show in the wartime, anything can change. Anything can change. You can't go by dates, although the dates of these congressional hearings are set. But conditions on the ground are changing how the generals are running everything. So you can't. If there's a plan to do X, they have contingency plans. It may go in all different directions, and maybe do Y or Z or something else. So. Yeah.
well, I would have loved when Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg were in the White House this last week if they were arrested and see some accountability. I mean, you look at it, you could make the argument very easily that what Zuckerberg was a part of was a coup, was supplanting democracy, putting his thumb on the scales with the censorship. Also, kind of, you talk about how many died from COVID and from the COVID bioweapons. They were censoring, vaccine injury. Not. Look at it. We just talked about that data. They shut down a Facebook group with 100,000 injured people in there from the COVID vaccine. That's incredible. Bill Gates, what? I can't believe this guy's walking around free and has the gall to keep, speaking with his contempt against humanity. He wants us eating bugs. He wants us to bury our forests. He wants us to block out the sun. He wants more GMO microbes, GMO all of us, and
well, that was that was all coordinated with what happened with RFK Jr. and him getting grilled regarding, basically exposing that the the vaccines may be problematic. And you see the people the legislators who are grilling him, who are they didn't bring any data to support the fact that they're safe. What they did is they just showed partisanship, and they showed their allegiance to this narrative. And I think a lot of people saw through those shenanigans, and so the people that are on that side, the deep state. Those are the ones that are sort of in the business world were brought into the White House right around the same time, and that wasn't by accident. So they were very much connected. It's a matter of exposure. They're exposing the corruption, and what Trump does, what any good military operation would do, if you can, bring your enemies in close. It's the Sun Tzu art of war describes how to do all this stuff. And by the way, I haven't read the art of the deal, but from what I understand, the art of the deal is basically the Sun Tzu art of war, just applied to business. He basically took the same principles, and that's where he got the idea. That's where he got the ideas for that book. But that's what this is all about. It's all war tactics. And General Michael Flynn, calls it fifth generation warfare. So using social media, using psychological operations, using all these different tactics of basically creating a narrative in a population and changing the narrative. And what the psychological operations command is, what they do in that part of the War Department. It's called the War Department now, instead of the Department of Defense, Department of War. What they do is they create deception. That's what they're all about. That's their mission. Their mission is to create deception, right? But what they're doing now is they're creating using the same tactics, but they're doing a reverse psyop. Instead of a psychological operation, doing a reverse psychological operations, they're now creating a new narrative, but now telling the truth. And it's a very, very methodical way of doing it. Brilliant. If you know what's happening and you see what's happening, it's like it's the greatest operation in the history of humankind, and it's the greatest time to be. It makes you feel like it's the greatest time to be alive. It's a very exciting time, and I love it. I mean, I'm happier, now than I've ever been in my entire life, because I just love watching what's happened. It's great.
All right, I got some pushback. Okay, so from the other side here,
Mm-hmm.
the other the other side, the other side's getting impatient here. They find each chess one more time, and then people talk about it. Understand 3D chess is the art of war, and I appreciate that. But
You're kind of breaking up. I can't hear what you're saying.
oh, I was just laughing at this here. Could you see this here with say 5D chess one more time here with Samuel Jackson?
Right. Oh, yes, I see that. Yeah, and
Uh,
that's what's happening. It's 5D chess. This operation. Yeah, but people are using that in a cynical way, saying,
well, I guess oh man, it's just scary when you talk about Bill Gates and Zuckerberg there, and Trump acting like he's going along with what they're saying a little bit, and yeah, I like what you're saying. I hope you're right about all this.
"Yeah,
Did
well, look, when Vivek and DeSantis ran for president against Donald Trump, remember Donald Trump was causing DeSantis like he had a nickname for him, the I forget his nickname, but he was they were opposing him, right? But I knew the whole time they were with him. What the whole purpose of that was is to bring the people who were believing some of this nonsense, and that they've been brainwashed in the media that Trump's a bad guy, but yet they're Republican and they really believe in Republican principles, and people who have been supporters of DeSantis for a long time, and all some of the other people on the fence, the independents who all of a sudden like Vivek but didn't like Trump. The whole purpose of them was to bring them into the Trump camp. So eventually they bowed out of the waist and they supported Trump right away. Who was the deep stater running? Nikki Haley, right? And again, I knew about this way beforehand. I was like, it's like watching a movie basically. And Nikki Haley is the deep stater. She pretends to be Republican, but she was in Davos and she's a baddie. So like anyway, so that tactic of doing something on the other side, so to speak, is like basically these are military tactics. That's how it works. In order to like, there's so many different reasons for things. It's a matter of like, if there are people in the inside in that room with Zuckerberg and Bill Gates and other things. First of all, if that you have to consider the possibility that some of those people may have been doppelgangers. Let's just say maybe they're not. Let's just say, if that's too much to handle for people, that's fine. Let's just
no,
say
no,
they're
no,
not.
no, no. This sounds great. I love this. Doppelgangers. What does that mean? Does that mean like they're like a clone?
Well, it could be a number of things. That there is the technology to make human clones that does exist, and that has been done. I'm telling you, I know it's been done. But let's put that aside for a second. The CIA, well known. It's well known. I mean, you can look it up on YouTube. They have the ability to make masks that look very, very, very real. So they put these masks on them. In fact, there's a famous, it's infamous maybe when it deals with Obama. There's a famous case infamous case where one of Obama's own people within his inner circle put a mask on and made herself look like someone else. and he came into the office to talk to him, and he believed that it was the person who was wearing the mask. So it's so believable, even in person. It can look like, look exactly like the person. So the masks are another way of doing it. And the other thing is this IT this not I mean AI this AI technology also, right? Like the background, you could tell this background I have is 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 not real because I can see myself when I'm looking at myself. But
Yeah, it's not very convincing.
right. So that's the world we live in. There's the technology exists to be able to create these false narratives when you're looking at a screen, even in person too. By the way, because like I said, so it exists. It's a that's not conspiracy. It totally exists. Is the government using it? I think they are. But again, that right there, if we can't agree on that, when some of the audience, people in the audience can't accept that, that's fine. But ultimately, let's just say hypothetically, all those people were real, okay? And you bring your enemies in close, like Trump with his first term. Think about this. All his first term people within his cabinet. I mean, a lot of them turned out to be bad people, right? A lot of like Bill Barr, like all these people, Pence, all these people that ultimately stabbed him in the back. In the end, it didn't carry out his own agenda. He brought those people in, and that wasn't by accident. He did it on purpose because now you look at after the January 20th this year, he all the people he brought in, they're all working for him. It's a whole different ballgame. You think he just wised up? No, this is whole thing's a strategy. And and think about this also. Think about this also. On January 20th this year, 2025, he hit the ground running. He did everything that was already ready to go, like all these executive orders and all the. I mean, there's no way he could just, go in January 20th and just like start to. I'm going to try to figure it out. And no, it was all because he's been in control in the background as a commander in chief. And by the way, also it's not by accident that the Supreme Court adjudicated, I think around 2015ish. I'm not sure exactly when, 2016 maybe, that the job of the commander in chief and the president of the United States was redefined. It was redefined as two separate positions. Prior to that, it was vague and it was always the same person. And once it was once it was defined legally to be two separate people, what happened in 2020 is the nuclear codes were not given to Biden. Trump kept him because he was still the commander in chief throughout the entire Biden administration. And you want to think that that's conspiracy? Well, let me tell you something. Go back and look at the news cycles, and you'll see public, open access, mainstream news. Nancy Pelosi, a few weeks after January 20th that year, 2020, Nancy Pelosi would put a bill in, at least beginning of February, for Congress to get the nuclear codes. The nuclear football. Nancy Pelosi put a bill in to try to get them. Why? Because she knew that Trump still had them and Biden did not have them, right? So it didn't work, but that was open. I remember there was a mainstream news. I'm like, wow, that's interesting. Like, is anybody even thinking about what's going on here, right? There's a lot happening behind the scenes.
That's wild. Yeah, it sounds like it. Tremendous. Well, I know you're busy. You got any closing thoughts to offer people? Any call to action? Anything we got to keep in mind?
I say just the main thing I think we need to all keep in mind today is have an open mind. Be open to to shut down conversations because it's conspiracy. We're starting to learn that some of these things that maybe were considered conspiracy in the past are now not conspiracy and are now factually true, and we're seeing that. So that's all. It's that whole trajectory is happening. The exposure is happening. In order to be able to see the exciting things happening today, the truth, you have to have an open mind. You have to don't shut the conversations down. Don't have a closed mind. Have an open mind, and then you'll start to see what the real truth is.
Well said. Well said. Yeah, we gotta be gentle as doves, wise as serpents. Trust but verify. And yeah, I tell you, you can't trust the serial criminals, and there are a lot of those walking around. So yeah, well said, Jay.
All right.
All right. Have a good day. I appreciate you joining me.
You too. Take care.